Alright guys, so let's go over different types of handguns. Now there's more than this, yeah I know, but these are the most common ones that you're going to see out and about in the marketplace and in this industry. So the first one we're going to talk about striker fired handguns, we're going to talk about single action handguns, and then we're going to talk about double action handguns and how those all differ and vary a little bit. Now one thing to take note of before we actually get into it is that the size of the handgun does matter, but smaller does not necessarily mean better when it comes to concealed carry weapons. You see that there's 5 sizes, normally extra small, small, medium, large, and extra large up here on the chart. And so watch the video in this course on the 6 handgun considerations, or 6 considerations when buying a handgun, and ask yourself if you could perform those tasks as described in the video, and if not, you may need a smaller or a larger handgun. And these are the sizes in terms of length and height that you could use in order to gauge what size handgun you need for your hands and your strength and your ability to function it with it, your dexterity. So let's talk about the different style handguns. First, let's talk about nomenclature for a striker fired handgun. A couple of really key things to take into consideration here. You'll notice this is called a tang. I don't know, I call that a beaver tail. And so does a lot of other people. I never heard of tang before. Slide lock, very important when it comes to locking the slide to the rear. We'll cover that later. Slide, that's this metal piece up here that goes back and forth. Like, that's the slide. Then we have the rear sight, and then we have the front sight, very important for aiming. This one right here, for example, has a red dot optic on it, on aim point. Ejection port, which is this gap right here where it's going to eject that shell casing from. The barrel, as you see right here, the muzzle is the front of the barrel that bullet comes out of. Accessories rail, don't have one on this gun, but you could put flashlights or something else on the bottom of the weapon system for accessories. You have the takedown lever, so this is what connects the slide to the lower receiver here. All of this together is called the lower receiver, and then the slide up, all that stuff up here can be called the upper receiver. Again, slide catch or slide lock. I call it the slide catch because it locks and it unlocks that slide. You have the trigger guard, you have the trigger, and then sometimes you'll have a safety up here, and then the magazine release. So you need to hit that button right there in order to drop that magazine. And the magazine well is where the magazine goes. And then here you have magazine. Inside the magazine, we'll break that down a little bit later. It's not a clip, guys, it's a magazine. It is important to know the difference between that. Now, when looking at that's a striker fired weapon. Now, when looking at an external hammer fired weapon system, you notice the big difference is that there's a hammer on the back end of this gun, and it motions and it moves sometimes when you pull the trigger, or at least when the slide goes to the rear. The big difference here, guys, is that this can either be fired in single or double action. We're going to cover the difference between those here shortly. But aside from that, everything else is basically exactly the same. A little bit different of a slide catch, a little bit different of a takedown lever. So in this case, this thing actually pops out. But that's with all variants of firearms. You're going to get these little minute differences between the different types of handguns that are out there. But external hammer fired weapon systems, that's the big difference right there. And then the third type we're going to talk about today is revolvers. You can tell it's a revolver because it has that cylinder right there. It doesn't have a magazine or a magazine release. Some key nomenclature to be aware of: cylinder, ejector rods, so that's how you actually get the shell casings or the rounds out of the cylinder after you put them in there. And that's really the big difference here when it comes to striker fired, external fired, external hammer fired weapon systems, and then revolvers. So in the next module, guys, what we're going to be talking about is semi-automatic handguns specifically, striker and external hammer-fired weapon systems, the different actions that come along with them. And so I'll see you over there in that next module.